In our last lesson, we covered addition of real numbers. And for this lesson, we're going to cover subtraction of real numbers. And there's a lot of nuance to this topic. There's a lot of different ways you can think about it. There's several different rules that can come into play. I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. And I'm actually going to approach it the way I was taught it a million years ago. And the way I was taught subtraction of real numbers is that there was no such thing as subtraction. And so I do this with my Algebra 2 students all the time. Let's see if I can write. Your first grade teacher lied to you. Not really. Okay, so with the shocking news that Ms. Smith, or whoever you had for first grade, I had Mrs. Vars, she was scary. She wasn't even a nice person, but lied to you. And so in first grade, you started doing takeaways, like 8 take away 2, and maybe you had some kind of manipulative on your desk, and you had 8 dots, and you would take away 2, and you'd count how many was left, and you would establish takeaways or subtraction. And then you tie that to the symbol, the minus sign, and so for the last several years of your education, you've been doing subtraction, and now some stranger on the internet is going to tell you, nope, there's no such thing as subtraction. Your first grade teacher lied to you. Here's the point there. Obviously, subtraction is an operation, but the definition of subtraction is this: it is addition of the opposite. And so when you're in first grade, you wouldn't ever teach a first grader that. A first grader is like 6 years old. And so you're not going to approach takeaways by talking about opposites. Now, just so we have all the vocabulary in context, remember that opposites are numbers that are the same distance away from 0, but on opposite sides of the 0. So -5 and 5 are opposites. And so because you're a six-year-old in first grade, nobody's going to throw negative numbers at you and start throwing more symbols. So yes, your teacher taught you subtraction. That's fine. But you are no longer in first grade. So we're going to approach subtraction as addition of the opposite. So what does that mean? So let's take a look at a couple of examples for what that would mean. If you had, say, we'll just go with 8 minus 2. If we talk about addition of the opposite, so we're going to keep the first number the same because that's what we're going to either subtract from or add to. So that number's not changing. Subtraction, the symbol in the middle, literally means add the opposite. So add the opposite of 2. Okay, I'll go through that again with the little pointer. 8, add the opposite of 2. So what would that mean? 8, add, well, what's the opposite of 2? That would be -2. And so 8 minus 2 can be written as 8 plus -2, and now it kicks right back to the lesson we just did where you would add your real numbers. And so we throw our number line out there, and we go to the right 8, and then we go back 2, and it lands us at the 6, which of course we know from our subtraction facts that 8 minus 2 is 6. So what we're just doing is we're changing over the notation of that. When I took Algebra 1, my Algebra 1 teacher never let us write subtraction all year. Once he taught us this, we had to write every single subtraction for the entire year as add the opposite or plus a negative. It seemed a little bit weird, and my mom, who is a math teacher herself, also thought it was weird and kind of wondered what her daughter's math teacher was doing. But it really drove home certain points about real numbers and how they work, and I don't do that now. Now I use the subtraction symbol, and it's fine. It was no problem kind of stopping doing that, but there was a reason why he did it, and there were certain mistakes that you're a lot less likely to make if you view subtraction as adding the opposite. So that's one example. Let's take a look at another example. suppose you had something like this, where you had 2 minus negative 3. Okay, so that's not what anybody ever wanted to see ever, say the double negative. But rather than panic, or you can have your hot minute of, uh-oh, what do I do with all those negatives? And then you think back to your definition. And I'm huge on definitions. Anybody who's had me as a math teacher knows that I'm really big on the vocabulary, knowing what the vocabulary means and being able to use it appropriately. So go back to your definition. Subtraction means adding the opposite. Math is awesomely consistent. It doesn't change. So we're going to have 2, and then we're going to add the opposite of negative 3. Okay, and again, I'll go through that again. 2, add the opposite of negative 3. So 2, add the opposite of, well, what is the opposite of negative 3? That would be positive 3. So we're going to add 3. And so that becomes just 5. So 2 minus negative 3 is just a hideously awful and ugly way of writing 2 plus 3. This does come up in algebra a lot. Where we'll have a formula that has a minus sign in it. Okay, so you've got some formula, we won't get into the specifics, but let's say you have a formula that's like x minus y. And then you've got x equals 3 and y equals negative 4. Okay, and so you go to plug it in and you plug in x equals 3. Well, now you've got 2 minus signs. You've got a minus sign with the formula, and you have another minus sign that comes in with the y. So the y is equal to negative 4, so I bring down this minus sign, but now I have another one in there, and that happens actually pretty frequently in algebra. So we want to get so that we're comfortable with that. A lot of times students will just say, oh, like the double negative gives you a positive, kind of like in the English language. If you don't have no money, then you must have some money. And he actually said the opposite of what you intended to say. But just like engage the definition. So subtraction means add the opposite of negative 4. So add, what's the opposite of negative 4? The opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. So that is something you want to get pretty good at. I'm going to do several more examples of this, and that's pretty much everything. That's everything in this lesson. Like I said, there are some other things that you can cover, like the opposite of a difference and the opposite of a sum. I think that's better to do after we talk about distribution. I just think those particular properties, which some teachers would teach, it's just easier for you guys to get after we talk about distribution and to think of it that way. So I'm going to skip that for now. All right, let's look at several more examples and hope that I don't give myself a paper cut. So let's do this one. Negative 4 minus 3. So subtraction means adding the opposite. So the first number doesn't change. That's whatever we're subtracting from or adding to. The minus sign becomes an addition sign. So add, and then we're going to add the opposite. Well, what's the opposite of 3? Negative 3. And what that does is it turns it into an addition problem. So if you practiced in the last section and you got comfortable enough with the adding, what we're doing is we're just changing all our subtraction over to adding. So here's my number line. I'm going to go left 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go left 3 more. So 1, 2, 3, and that's going to put me down there at negative 7. Next example, we have, what is our next example? 10 minus 11. So that's going to be 10, add the opposite. So what's the opposite of 11? That would be negative 11. And then again, if you're comfortable with not doing the number line, that's totally fine. Okay, you just kind of can move away from the number line at your pace, whatever's comfortable for you. We're going to go to the right 10, and then we're going to go to the left 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. and we're going to go that way, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to come back 11. So we're going to come back 10, and then we're going to go one more, and that's going to put us at the -1. Next one, what fun is this? We have 5 minus -4. Sometimes you might see this written like this, 5 minus, and then you'll see the -4 like that, just so you're okay with the different way that that might be written. This is actually the same symbol. I had a student recently, like end of last week, maybe yesterday, I don't remember, ask me about this. They're like, well, is this a minus sign or a negative sign? And my answer was yes, which is not probably what they wanted to hear, but it is the same symbol. Sometimes when you're talking about a negative number, we'll write it like a little bit higher and a little bit smaller, but it is the same symbol. It's just so that we don't run the two symbols into each other. And that's also the function of the parentheses over there. Because if you did this, okay, you run the real risk of the two negative signs just running together. We don't want that to happen. So we just find a way notationally to make it look a little bit different. All right. And also on your calculators will often have 2 separate keys, one for subtraction and one for a negative. And it's always bothered me because it's the same symbol, but if you don't talk to your calculator the right way, it will error on you. So, all right, let's go ahead and do this one. So we have 5, and then we're going to add the opposite. So add the opposite of what? The opposite of -4 is 4. And so 5 minus -4 is just a yucky way of writing 9. All right, and the last one of these, we're going to do -3/2 minus -1/2. Well, that's fantastic. So have your moment of, why is she doing this? Why am I watching this video? I could be doing something way more fun, which is probably true, but you're watching this video. So we're giving you 3 negative signs and fractions in the same problem, because why not? And it's totally okay, because math is consistent, and everything that worked in the previous problems is going to work in this problem as well, so we don't freak out about it. We keep the first number, okay? So that number doesn't change. That's whatever we're subtracting or adding to. Then we have the minus sign, and the minus sign still means the same thing. It means add the opposite. So we'll go put our plus sign in, and then we need to think, okay, well, what's the opposite? Well, the opposite of -1/2 is +1/2. All right, so we have -3/2 plus 1/2. Let's go bust out our number line and see if we can figure that out. I'm gonna go do this. All right. I probably didn't do that quite right. Let me see if I can make this a little bit better. Okay. So let's start at the 0, and we're going to go left 3/2. So watch what I do here. I'm going to grab the green pen here. We're going to go left 1/2, 2/2, 3/2. Notice I'm just going half a unit each time. So I'll do that with the arrow. We go -1/2. So we went half the way, 2/2, so we just went halfway again, 3/2. Now I'm going to go positive, I'm going to go positive back 1/2. And that's going to land me at -1. It's a thing of beauty. It really is. All right, so that's where I'm going to leave off on that. Oh, let's do one more. Let's do one that's just got multiple operations in it. So let's do 3 minus -4 minus 2 plus 8. Okay? So we work from left to right. We did this with the order of operations. When you have adding and subtracting, you just go from left to right. So don't try to add the 2 and the 8 or anything like that. It's not adding first. If you need to go back and rewatch that video on order of operations, hop on back and watch that video to give yourself a little refresher on that. When it's adding and subtracting, we are going to go from left to right. So the first thing we have to tackle here is 3 minus -4. Don't panic. Minusing is just adding the opposite. So we're going to add the opposite of -4, which is 4. I'll go ahead and copy that down. 3 plus 4 is 7. Okay, now you could just go like 7 minus 2 is 5. That's fine, but that defeats the point of this lesson. We don't want to defeat the point of the lesson. So we are going to add the opposite. So we'll have 7 add, well, what's the opposite of 2? The opposite of 2 is negative 2. And then if you need to, remember this is going to end up being 5. So we go to the right 7, and then we're going to back up 2 more, which is going to land us at the 5. And then 5 plus 8 is 13. You do not need to do all of those steps. I really went overboard with the steps there so that I can clarify exactly what's happening. But your own personal work, you don't necessarily have to show that much. Now, with this, the idea is to be able to handle subtraction and see subtraction as an addition problem. It really is a useful skill. So even if you can do the problems a different way, really try to make yourself think through them using the definition of subtraction. So as always, I'm going to put a couple problems on the next slide for you to practice with and seek out additional practice problems if you need it. Okay, so here's what we have for practice problems. 3 minus 8, 7 minus 4, negative 1 minus 5. 8 minus the absolute value of negative 6. So we want to remember what absolute value is. If you need to go back in your notes or go back to a previous video to look up the definition for that, go for it. 5 is negative 3 minus the absolute value of 5. 6 is 2 minus negative 6 minus 7. 7 is negative 6 plus 5 minus 4. And 8 is an algebraic expression where you need to substitute. So 4 minus, and then to say this, I would probably use the word quantity. So I would say 4 minus quantity, 1 plus x, if x equals 2. And so the way when I'm speaking out loud that I would express those parentheses as I would use the word quantity. So pause the video, give yourself a chance to practice, and then unpause it when you're ready, and we'll go over these problems. Okay, what I'm going to do is use a number line out to the side as needed, and I'm going to do the work for one problem, and then I'll erase it and do the work for the next problem. So for the first one, we have 3 minus 8. And we want to remember that subtraction is adding the opposite. So that becomes 3 plus the opposite of 8, which is negative 8. Putting that onto my number line, I'm going to go to the right 3. And then I'm going to go to the left 8. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Which is going to put me down there at negative 5. You do not need to use the number line if you don't need it. For number 2, honestly, it's 7 minus 4. Don't overthink it. But just to reiterate, what my Algebra 1 teacher made me do is in every single problem, he didn't make us do that. He made us write all of our subtraction all year in Algebra 1 as 7 plus negative, like we had to do plus negative, plus negative, plus negative. So on your number line, you're going to start out with your 0. You're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way out to the 7. And then you're going to back up 1, 2, 3, 4, which is going to put you at 3. Okay, keep reinforcing that. It is really important. Number 3, we get into an ocean of negatives. This is wonderful. So we've got negative 1 minus 5. So negative 1 minus 5. Have your moment of panic because that's more negatives than you really wanted to see. And then think, but wait, I know the definition. So it'll be negative 1 plus the opposite. That's all subtraction is. It means adding the opposite. So we're going to add the opposite of 5 is negative 5. On your number line, this means you're going to go left 1, and then you're going to go left another 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is going to put you down there at negative 6. For the next one, we have 8 minus the absolute value of negative 6. So you have to recall stuff. Absolute value is distance from 0. Okay, that's what it is. So instead of saying the absolute value of negative 6, you might say, well, the distance from 0 of negative 6. So 8 minus, on your number line, here's your 0, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, negative 6. You ask yourself, well, how far away from 0 is that? That is 6 units away from 0. So that's just a way of writing 8 minus 6. And then subtraction means to add the opposite. So on our number line, and I don't have space to do it, but we're going to go right 8 and then turn around and go back 6, which is going to land us at 2. All right. Next one is negative 3 minus the absolute value of 5. And for this one, I really think it's important not to slip into a misconception about what absolute value is. So absolute value is distance from 0. How far away from 0 is 5? It is 5 units away. I do see a lot of Algebra 2 students that will flip the sign on that, and it's not accurate. So this would be negative 3 minus 5, or negative 3 plus negative 5, because we're adding the opposite. On your number line, you would start at 0, you're going to go left 3, and then left 5 more, which is going to bring you down to negative 8. Okay, so there's my 0. I'm going to go left 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's where I'll be. Next one is our 3 operations. So for this one, we've got 2 minus negative 6 minus 7. And you can weep in your heart, but you can't let it get you down. So we're going to do add the opposite. Well, what's the opposite of negative 6? That would be positive 6. And a lot of my students will say stuff like plus positive, which is redundant. Like that's just adding. 2 plus 6 is 8. And then we have adding the opposite. So you can do 8 minus 7, and don't lose sight of it's 8 minus 7. So it's 1, like the same problem you did in first grade. But also keep in mind the integer aspect of it. So it's 8 plus negative 7. So you're going to go 8 to the right and then 7 to the left, which is going to bring you back to your 1. Next one there is negative 6 plus 5 minus 4. So negative 6 plus 5 minus 4. Negative 6 plus 5, you're going to go left 6 and then right 5, which is going to bring you to negative 1. And then negative 1 minus 4 would be the same as negative 1 plus negative 4. So on your number line, you're going to go left 1 and then left 4 more, which will bring you to negative 5. Oh my gosh. There's somebody outside my window with a flashlight, and it just freaked me out. Okay, sorry about that. That's not unnerving at all. Okay, the last one is 4 minus 1 plus x, and we have x is equal to 2, so we're going to go ahead and substitute in x is 2. Notice that top-down structure, so just go top-down, and then we use order of operations, so we do what's in the parentheses first. 1 plus 2 is 3, and then using the adding the opposite, 4 minus 3, which I hope you know is 1, we can do the subtraction. So we do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back 3, which is going to land us at 1. All right, that video ran a little bit longer because I think I took a long time to explain them, but hopefully it seemed easy, and always seek out extra help, extra practice, and ask questions when you can. And we'll move on to the next lesson in the next video.